The history of a town like Braddock is inscribed on our bodies. The way that our flesh is kind of changing and shifting as we're within the environment. And I remember as a kid not being able to articulate it, but I could sense it and understood that there was something wrong, right, with my environment. I turned to art because of it. And you see that? That Bach gases, that's where the Talbot Towers was. That's where I lived before they replaced it with that. I would hit this corner. I remember when I would come from my bus stop, I would look like something's not right. I was used to hearing the train whistling coming by. And the smell of the atomized metal. The factory was always present. It became really important for me to look at how the steel industry and how the environment was affecting my family and the community. And my photographs testify to that. How corporations really do control and regulate our bodies. For 12 years, I've been making this body of work that's been dealing with the history and the landscape and how it's been shifting in Braddock, Pennsylvania. It visually renders through the bodies of myself, my grandmother, and my mother, seeing us through portraits as markers of the social and economic shift and the decline of the industry. I lived at the last block next to the railroad tracks underneath the mill. It never really occurred to me that perhaps this was dangerous and contributing to why I was constantly in the hospital. We have to consume this stuff. We breathe it in, we eat it. The industry is expanding and it's growing, and it's still continuing to pollute the soil, the land, the water, and the air. And unlike people and their policies, the environment kills indiscriminately. Gramps had worked in the factory. The impact of working in high temperatures, tearing down and rebuilding furnaces, destroyed his body. He became essentially very stiff, like steel itself. And the corporation discarded him when he was no longer of any use. The idea to photograph my mother and grandmother came from the first time I encountered Dorothea Lange's migrant mother. I started thinking about this triangle that was happening. So there was Dorothea Lange, the photographer, then there's Florence Owens Thompson with her children, the subject, but then there's the government and the corporation who is sponsoring and controlling and framing this project. So we never really hear Florence Owens Thompson's voice. We never see her vision. I wanted to make photographs with my mother and my grandmother as if we were kind of usurping that power and bringing that agency that was denied. So it was just a simple question. What would Florence Owens Thompson's portraits look like had she made them herself? And through that inquiry, I was able to return home with my 35mm camera and started making portraits with my mother. She's very interested in art, but she hadn't worked with making her own portraits. But because she's such a powerful presence and a character, she instantly engaged with the camera. The mainstream narrative and story about Black women in our lives is completely distorted. And we've never been able to speak for ourselves. We've never been able to bring a visual representation that challenges the complexity of what our bodies have endured. We've simply had our voices and our stories completely negated, silenced, and omitted from the history. So here we are, these invisible women. We're hidden. Mysterious. We're being kind of masked and concealed by this heavy industry, the soot, the toxicity, the haze from the millions of particles that are in that sky. If you deem them unworthy to be seen, that takes away their humanity. I also became very concerned about the notion that only the elite or the privileged can make work about the disenfranchised. I thought that it was really important for me to break that buffer zone by giving the camera to my mother and letting her turn the camera on me. It ruptures and breaks this elite, high-class thinking that the person who didn't go to school or doesn't have access to that information isn't capable of making a work of art. How are we going to be able to stop ourselves as a society and a culture from repeating the same type of stereotypes or prejudice or segregation again? So as we revitalize the Rust Belt, where are the gaps? Where are the holes? The only way to know is to photograph it. What I'm calling for in the work is another movement in photography to document this as it changes. It's about the past, the present, and the future always collapsing on each other. Trying to reach for a future or trying to reckon and understand what that future could be.